All right, Serena, we are good to go.
Thank you, Spencer. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in our office hours today. For today, we will be discussing performance tasks. And at this time, I'm going to ask that you please mute your microphone. You may choose to turn off your camera or keep it on. And please introduce yourself if you have not done so into the chat section. I've seen that some of you have already done so. And I'm also going to ask that you put your microphone on mute because we're going to be recording this. Later on, you can turn it on when we're ready to ask and answer questions. Now, please note, we are going to be recording this session for anyone who maybe need to go back and review, clarify what was said, or maybe need to share with your staff. So you will have this presentation once we're done. Can you go to the next? Thank you, Spencer. So for our objectives today, we have three things that we're looking at. We're going to be relating the value of the WCPSS Performance Task for staff and students. We're also going to describe how to analyze and apply the data from the 1920 performance task that we have administered. And then we're going to describe how to administer the voluntary, and I'm saying it again, voluntary performance task through different learning management systems that you have, like Google Classroom and Schoolnet.
Yeah, and I believe looking at the questions that came in that we should be hitting on each of the things that people requested, but if there's something we missed or if you have any questions, don't be shy about tossing them in the chat and we'll address them.
Thank you. So just a quick check-in. If you don't mind going to the URL right here or scanning the code. So we have, and this is not a trick question, this is just us simply having a discussion and talking about performance task. So what skills or qualities do or students need when they graduate? So what skills or quality do our students need when they graduate? If you don't mind, go ahead and put in your response to that.
I'll drop this in the chat just really quick.
Thanks.
No problem. Let me just, yeah, so I should pull up the screen like here and just drop in the skills or qualities that you would like to see students graduate with. And then in a second, I'll pull up the results. We'll see. So we got a couple pulling up. As people vote, they should. Yep, there we go. We'll just filibuster as the votes come in. There's a tool called Mentimeter. If you're not familiar with it, might be a helpful tool when you're teaching either synchronously or asynchronously to get a kind of sense of where students or staff's kind of thoughts lie. And so, for instance, for this one, we're seeing a bit of collaboration, critical thinking, communication. The more votes that come in, the larger the word will be. Serena, if you want to chat about that, and let me know when you want me to go back to the presentation.
Sure, not a problem. Okay, so I'm seeing some of our 4C skills popping up here. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing communication, collaboration, critical thinking. Am I missing anything else here? I'm sure
writing is popping up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So collaboration is one of the biggest one, and we're needing that ever so more than now. You know, persons need to be collaborating in remote learning and doing it well. And I was looking for creativity. I haven't seen that one popping up yet. Well, I should have put my own there. I should have.
Rig the vote, Serena. Drop it in now.
No, I need to rig it now. Yes. And so also I'm seeing writing. Yes, writing. And that is part of what our performance task that we ask our students to do is to write. That communication piece, not just, talking verbally, but also writing. So I'm glad that I'm seeing those big ones popping up. Yeah. All right, Spencer, do you want to say anything here, Spencer?
Oh, just that I'm glad as well, because that would have been a lousy segue if it didn't work, but that was kind of the basis for the idea for the performance task is we value our kids' communication and critical thinking, those skills, but we didn't have a great way to measure them, which brings us to the performance task.
All right. So for those of you who are familiar already with the performance task that we've been administering since 2018. So we have this definition here for performance tasks that we want to assess our students' ability to think critically, solve problems, and communicate clearly. And we administer the performance task to 4th and 7th grade students. Not to say that we're only checking in on those students, but we do have curriculums that also has performance tasks that checks in on that for us. And as time goes by, we will be considering looking into other grade levels. Now, the performance task, for those persons who are not familiar with it, we started off back in 2018 working with different groups of persons in central office as well as teachers. We all came up with the idea that we needed to see not just to balance our assessment system. And when I say balance our assessment system, so we know we have our regular end of grade assessments that we give, like the multiple choice that they get, but we also wanted to look into other skills that our regular multiple choice does not tap into. And so we thought to ourselves that the performance task would have been a good way to check on some skills that we know we're kind of not hitting when we're looking at just like the regular short answer, multiple choice, selected response. So that's where our performance task nicely comes in and try to balance out what is it that we're asking our students to know and be able to do.
Yeah, and so we'll start talking a little bit about last year's administration and this year's administration. And we noticed that there was a few people from the high school level. We'll touch upon how this can be beneficial for you as well. So last year we had a pair of tasks. For 4th grade, they're presented with a prompt around recess, where essentially they were asked, should schools implement a free choice recess, structured recess, or some kind of blend of the two? And so they were given a number of sources that touched on for each, pulling from a few different mediums, and they'd have to review those different sources and then make a pitch to a principal about, which type of recess is better. For 7th grade, they were given a prompt about snow day, where they were shown a weather forecast showing that a snowstorm was probably going to hit part, but not all of the school district. And they're reading, say, like a blog post from one kid saying why, like, oh, we should definitely cancel, but there's some comments off of it saying, like, no, there's no need. They've read the the district policy about snow days, and a few other pieces. And then they would have to decide whether the school should cancel or not and write it up as a message to a superintendent. So those were the 2 different tasks. And this was administered in March. Most schools were able to pull it off, but last year being what last year was, not quite everybody did. And we have a number of different reports for you guys so that you can use this data to reach and teach your students to gauge what their critical thinking, their communication, their problem solving skills are, and to act on them, maybe tap into some of those skills that we can motivate them. So all these are going to be available in FIFO, and I'll talk about that in a second if you're unfamiliar. But you'll get individual student reports. So for every kid, an electronic copy that you can then send through any number of ways, that's going to have their score. It's going to have a comparison to the school average, the district average. It's going to have a breakdown of what the rubric was, and then some strategies to consider so that they can improve here. You're going to get some data charts. So for your school compared to your region and all of Wake County and broken down into subgroups. And also to try to make it easier to kind of lead and actually act on this information, we kind of put all this together into like one pre-packaged presentation. They'll run in, I'll have your data, I'll explain what the prompt is, and I'll have some next steps and some discussion questions that you might be able to lead this in a PLT or staff meeting. And all of these are available in FIFO, which is the quicker replacement. If you're unfamiliar with FIFO, our last session was on it. So if you go to our website, and we'll drop this in the chat, you'll find a recording of that session there and an FAQ document. For high schools, this data is also available in SOAR. And so that you can kind of pull up some of your 8th and 9th graders to get a sense of how they did when they took this assessment, so you can get a sense of their communication and critical thinking skills. Any questions before we jump into the 2021 administration on last year's performance task? I know there's a weird view as you see me looking at my screen, but I just wanted to see if any questions come in. So the FIFO website. So our office hours, I'll drop this in, give a shorter URL, but this will kind of take you there. That's where we put all the topics that we're covering, and afterwards we have a recording and any resources. So for instance, tomorrow you'll see a recording in this presentation if there's anyone that you want to share it with. So if you go there and go to the November 10th, you can get a recording of that session just for, I think that was a quick one. That was, I think, only about 20 minutes. So you can get a sense of what FIFO is, how to access. It's a very intuitive system, so that should be helpful.
And I'll just add that FIFO is in the OASIS dashboard. So when you log into Wake ID, you should see the OASIS icon. And when you click on that, you will see the FIFO icon. Yeah, so if you just go ahead and click on OASIS.
Yep, now that the pressure's on, I'm panicking. And
right under the health screening, right under the health screening.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then there's the files in, files out. So if you click there, just real quickly, we can show you. And then go ahead, Spencer, and click on file under school, click on file retrieval. So this is the replacement of Quicker if you have not seen this. And Spencer will have to select a school.
Yep, and you'll have all the materials. Oh, yeah. I was saying this, and you can search, it's really intuitive. You can search here, or you can break it down by year or search by assessment. So you can see the data that is available there. It's a good system.
Yeah, so just if you just plug in or click on the category for performance assessment, and they will, it will quickly come up.
Yep.
And then you can download the
information. Okay. Any other questions about 1920? All right, so for this year then, we're doing a voluntary administration. The idea of a mandatory in-person paper pencil assessment was not only logistically not feasible, but didn't quite seem morally appropriate as well, but we still want to give teachers a way to gauge your students' critical thinking and communication skills. We still want to give you the resources to make it really easy for you to kind of get a glimpse of what they can do and give them that feedback. So what we decided to do is just make available to you all of our resources so that you can then administer the performance task through your learning management system via Google Classroom or Canvas or through Schoolnet. So I mentioned the recess prompt and the snow day prompt. We've also previously administered a prompt for fourth graders on drought, what steps schools should take to respond to a drought, and foreign conflict. So should the U.S. intervene in foreign conflict? So each of these, you're going to have a bunch of different sources for students to review, and then they have to kind of take a stand and back it up. So all the materials for these administration can be found at this URL, and I will drop this right in the chat really quick. And I'll show you briefly what you're going to find there. So if you go to that URL, you're going to see a Google folder. And there's an instruction slide that will kind of cover all the stuff that I'm talking about right now. And then you'll have a folder for each of those prompts. So we'll snow day, for instance, and you'll have a number of files there. So you'll have a task document in both English and Spanish. And so this is going to have the actual prompt with the resources to review, all that kind of stuff, the checklist, everything that they need to know. And then you'll also have a response document, again, in both English and Spanish. So if you're using the LMS, this is what you can kind of drop in there and have students have a copy and then respond. The last thing you're going to see for each prompt is we want to give you a sense of just how this had been scored in the past. So previously, we had partnered with a professional scoring company, MI in Durham, and they calibrated, made sure all the scores were reliable and valid. So we gave you a couple anchor works to give you a sense of how they were scored, and we kind of annotated it to give you a sense of how you might annotate and give your kids feedback. The last thing I'll show in this folder is actually two more things: administration videos. So if you're not as familiar with pushing out an assignment in Google Classroom, in Canvas, or accessing what we have in Schoolnet, you can pull up any of these videos. Each of them are pretty short, just a few minutes, and they'll review how to administer them. For rubrics, we have just a standard PDF rubric. We also have, if you're not familiar, in Google Classroom, you can drop in a specially formatted rubric, and that's going to then set up nicely with the UI. So I can just show you kind of really quick. So when you create the assignment in Google Classroom, and then when students turn in work, Melissa, I'm going to use you as an example, it will then pull in that spreadsheet rubric so that you can use it just right here as you're reading. So you don't have to kind of leave this window in order to quickly say, okay, I get 2 there, 1 there, and add in, any comments. I think yes, add in, nice job. Oops, I did suggest mode, but you get the idea. And then add in your comments for students so that you can return it to them. So that's administration for Google Classroom and how the rubric could be helpful there. Serena, we got about 10 minutes left. Did you want to share anything about Schoolnet?
Sure. I'm not going to switch my screen seeing that time is going. But for the Schoolnet, the performance task, they're also uploaded in Schoolnet. You will see the performance task on your, teachers will see the performance task on their Schoolnet dashboard for them to take, to administer to the students. Like I said, this is voluntary. My suggestion in terms of scoring the performance task is to maybe have, teachers sit in their teams and, talk about the points that they're going to be allotting. I would not necessarily suggest you giving the students this as a grade, to put on their report card. No, because like I said, this is all voluntary. And also whenever you score the performance task, go over it with the students, because Marky, students will be new to all of this, right? Unlike, in the past where we have teachers all prepped and they're knowing exactly do this, do that. Spencer has already dropped the, I think the teacher instructions. That is something that you want to tell the teachers to read over before administering this with their students. But in Schoolnet, it is pretty, we've created some videos for you. So I'm sure there are going to be some teachers who do not know anything about what Schoolnet is. And also there are some teachers who know what Schoolnet is, but not so much familiar with it as to how to navigate it. So we have created videos for how students can access it, how teachers can access it. And then after students have taken the video, taken the performance task, how the teacher should go back into Schoolnet and score it. So that is pretty much I shouldn't say self-explanatory. The video is there. But if for whatever reason you need further assistance, say for example, some teachers want to use Google Classroom. If you need some help with that, shout out to Spencer for that. If you need any assistance with how the teacher should, navigate the performance task in Schoolnet, you can send me a message. I'll be willing and ready to assist. Spencer, you can go on.
Yeah, so whichever medium you're most comfortable with, that's how you can administer it. And it's also kind of nice, previously it was just 4th and 7th grade. It was just one particular day. We hope that this might give you some flexibility. So maybe you're a high school teacher and you want to get a sense of what a kid might be able to do. Just pulling this up for maybe a small group of students or something. You have a lot of options, and we hope it's helpful. So we want to take a moment to ask you a question and then see if you have any questions for us as we start to wrap up. So what's one idea or next step you have to share with your staff or students? So if you could take a moment and either enter that in the chat, or if you're feeling brave and you want to do the raise hand icon and share through your computer, that'd be nice too. You could get some different voices there. And Serena, if you can just read out any questions, since I'm not able to see the chat.
Sure.
Or comments.
Okay, so someone is asking, where do we access the individual student report that goes on to parents?
So that will be through FIFO. They should all be uploaded through there.
Thank you, Spencer.
You're welcome.
So basically this is just going to be used this year. It's not going through your office. We would just use this information and you guys aren't sending it out for grading. Like it would be used more as like just a tool and the kids wouldn't get the official reports. We're just going to use it like a writing assignment almost.
Correct. This year,
Okay.
It's a resource for you, not a mandatory accountability kind of resource for us. And that's, big picture, what we really want it to be anyways. So maybe this helps just with that messaging. It's just meant to be something to help you get a sense of where your kids are with these skills and give them some feedback so you can act on it.
And so should we go to our principal and just ask him what he thinks that we should be doing? Like, just present this to him and just ask him. I mean, do we have, yeah.
So it would be a school and or classroom kind of decision about how you want to do this. If a school wants to do it on a school-wide basis to have something to get a data point so PLTs can talk, great. If it wants to be just a teacher is doing it with a couple students because they finished their EL Module 3 performance task early and they want to challenge them with something else, that's awesome too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Jennifer, I'm glad that you asked that question, because when I created the performance task in Schoolnet, I had the option of just allowing all teachers to have access to it, or I had the option to administer it to schools. As you mentioned, you would have maybe talk to your principal about that. So I'm glad that you asked that question, because I'm sure maybe you would want to streamline how teachers are going to be using this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're kind of getting into
I have some more questions there, Spencer. Can we talk, let me see here. Can we walk through finding the individual report? Can you do that for them right now, Spencer?
Report. I think, how about, so I will make sure I'm kind of respecting everyone's time. So I think we'll kind of end recording, because I also don't want to be in the recording kind of showing schools data. Right. And then after I hit stop recording, we can pull that up afterwards, if that's okay.
And the next question asked was, is it an optional resource, right? Yes, it is.
Correct.
And yes, it's housed in Schoolnet, and it's also housed in Google Classrooms.
Yeah, and we're giving you the resources to drop them in Google Classroom or Canvas. If you've been using either for your LMS, you kind of know how to do it. And we have everything made, so it's just clicking on the file. Schoolnet, right, on the other hand, everything's already there for you. So it's a question of preference and what you're used to.
Right, and I'm not certain how many teachers are using even Seesaw, but if you want to maybe put something in there, maybe there are some teachers at the 4th grade level using Seesaw, you can also use it there. So you're free to use it in whatever learning management system you're comfortable with.
Yeah, no, Seesaw isn't necessarily a district-approved learning management system, but you can use it for activities. But same thing, that the documents we have in the folder, you're able to drop it in, whatever's going to be useful for you to provide to your students.
So someone asked, does it only has to be used with 7th grade? No. So you can, well, right now we're administering it to 4th and 7th grade. Let me ask, is that question in regards to, could I use it maybe with a 6th grade or 5th grade? Is that what that one is about?
Yeah, and I'll just mention one thing there to make sure that you're not giving students something that they already had. Last year was the first year that we administered the recess or snow day tasks. So if you have a 5th or 8th grader, that's what they would have taken. So you wouldn't want to do that same one again, but they wouldn't have seen the foreign conflict or the drought one. And vice versa. If it's, then therefore a 6th grader, they would have seen drought, but not recess, foreign conflict, right, not snow day.
Another question here, if we participate this year, would there be an expectation to share our scoring or result with the district? No.
No, we're not focusing on the kind of reliability as much there, so it wouldn't necessarily be an apples to apples comparison. We might chat when hopefully things settle down, just get a sense of your experience so we can improve this process moving forward. But there's no, you have to send in the scores through whatever kind of process. Good question.
Now there are some more questions about FIFO. So as Spencer mentioned, we will end the recording, just be cognizant of person's time, and then we'll continue showing you how to find things in FIFO. Let me continue. What date should this be issued? Okay, so that's also at your school level. That's a decision that you can make at your school level. They are already available. It's for you to decide when you want to administer it. A next question. You have something to say, Spencer?
I was just saying that's a good question.
Okay. All right. We score them ourselves. Yes, you can score them yourself. So like I said, with the way Spencer had set up, I'd show you how to use Google Classroom. It is pretty much you scoring them yourself. In Schoolnet, it's pretty much you scoring it yourself. And like I said, we have videos that show you how to go about doing it. A scoring rubric is provided in Schoolnet and Google Classroom. Yes, the same rubric that we have used when students were doing the pencil and paper copy, that's the same rubric we have uploaded. So you'll see it very much outlined the same way. And it's just a matter of checking, okay, I'm giving a 1 for this, I'm giving a 2 for that, and it will calibrate. It will give the score, the total.
Yeah, and remember the rubric, and especially with this not being something that is kind of centrally administered, it's more about, providing an opportunity for feedback, because this is not your standards, the critical thinking communication. This is meant to give you, to open up useful conversations with your students so that they can recognize that they might have some skills and how they can use those in the future.
I have one more question here, Spencer. It says, yes, could I use it in middle school grade? Yes, you can.
Yeah, in middle
school. 7th grade is middle school.
Yeah, in middle school, by all means, whichever grade you are, if this is going to be helpful to use with your students, yes, but not for grade, if that's what the question was, since these are specifically not meant to be tied to any of the content standards.
I have another question here. I assume we should not give one in an earlier grade, so we don't practice one they may have to complete in the future, correct? Oh,
that's a great question. We would not, since we're releasing these, and Sonia, correct me if I'm off base here. I think that's appropriate. So if you have a 3rd grader that you want to see what they can do, this might be a nice kind of activity to do with, say, maybe some AIG students or something.
Yes, that's correct. You can use these however you want, because if we go back to administering them at the district level or making them mandatory for the district, we will create new performance tasks. So you don't have to worry about what will happen in the future in terms of students retaking one that they've already been exposed to.
And I think Sonia clarified the last part of that question where the person asks, we could only give one that was previous grade. Well, like we mentioned, now that you have all of them, you can choose whichever one you want to give. Yeah. And as Spencer mentioned before, if you're, for example, planning on giving this to one of your 5th grade student, but keep in mind that the 5th grade student was in 4th grade and would have taken that performance task already.
Yeah, so that's essentially, there's just a resource that we're sharing with you and hope that it's helpful. And feel free to contact us with any questions or comments about things that you found to be beneficial that we might want to consider moving forward.
And just to follow up on what Spencer and Serena just said, if you do decide to give a 5th grader the performance task that they took in 4th grade, you could kind of use it as a pre-post assessment because they may not remember what they wrote. And so it would be interesting to see how much they've improved on these particular skills. So again, what I guess the gist of what we're trying to say to you is we wanted to provide you with these resources that you can use to help continue to measure these 21st century learning skills that we know are extremely important for our students, and a way for us to understand where they are, or for you to understand where they are and what skills need to be improved upon. And I will say also that we are working to create new performance assessments that we will continue to load into the tools that we have. So you may see some new performance assessments that will be there that you can use again in the same manner.
Yeah, we'll stick around afterwards for any questions, but I just want to respect people's time. Mention that any future sessions, previous sessions, see recordings you can find at this URL here. I will drop that in the chat in a second. Our next session, which has my favorite pun in the whole series, resources for getting your act together. That's nicely done. So that's going to be December 8th, 3:30 and 4. Same URL, and we'll have messages going through Wake Connect and a few other places beforehand. So if you're interested, we hope to see you there. And like I said, we'll stick around for any other questions, but for those that need to get going, since we said 4 o'clock, we wanted to wrap up there. Here is that link. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll stick around for a few more minutes for questions.